Okay, so this webinar takes place as the final webinar of our three-part webinar series and serves as the ReNu2Cycle project midterm event. Today, we will present the progress made in developing a methodology for the sustainability assessment of recycling-derived fertilizers. We call them in abbreviation the RDFs, which we have developed jointly in recent months, where we have defined a structure for this novel methodology and integrated already initial data sets and findings from both the previous ReNu2Farm project and the follow-up project, the ongoing ReNu2Cycle project. This has allowed us to conduct first assessments already of key sustainability indicators, and we are pleased to share these findings and preliminary results with all of you. Our goal today is to introduce in particular the methodology, present our current outcomes, and most importantly, engage in discussion. Your feedback and expertise are crucial as we continue refining and validating our approach. We also warmly welcome you and invite you to continue working with us beyond today's session. In the upcoming working meetings, we will deepen data collection, validation, and furthermore development of the methodology. These meetings we will publish, and they will be facilitated from January ongoing. This webinar series is hosted by the ESNI network group, specifically under the sustainability subgroup led by the European project of NovaFert. The mission in general of ESNI is to foster collaboration among European entities in the nutrient recycling community, and also to facilitate experience exchange and identify knowledge gaps to guide through our future joint research. We are grateful to have this platform within the nutrient community to share and discuss our ongoing work from ReNu2Cycle. Just that you know what ReNu2Cycle is researching on. ReNu2Cycle, the full name of the project is Recycling of Nutrients to Close the Fertilizer Cycle, and this project is under a collaboration of 13 partners from Belgium, Germany, Ireland, Luxembourg, and Netherlands, who are cooperating in the time framework between 2023 and 2027. On the right, you can see the logos of the full partnership, which represent partners from research and development, from economy, and also from authorities. This project is funded under the Interreg Europe North West program with a total budget of 6 million euros. And this project is led by ICES in Germany, located in Saarland, where I'm working for and where I take the role as the lead of the project. If you would like to contact us, please use this email address, ReNu2Cycle@ices.de. Let me very briefly outline our project and its key objectives. As its core, ReNu2Cycle aims to support the market implementation of RDFs in North Europe. So by doing so, we work to reduce the dependency on fossil-based fertilizers and to promote the valorization of nutrient-rich waste streams. Within the project, we are testing and piloting innovative blended RDF products. So blended is here the novelty of the project in regional field trials and also import trials to better understand their performances and practical applicability. A central element of our approach is the involvement of stakeholders across the entire value chain, from the resource owners to the end users, which we want to bring together through our new engagement format, the so-called Living Lab. Finally, we contribute to the European policy dialogue, and we develop nutrient regional strategies in Northwest Europe for the RDF market implementation. Now let me introduce in we walk through the key aspects of sustainability, explain the methodology structure and how it can support future farming practices and decision-making towards RDF use. Professor Dr. Katharina Gab-Schmeling will present the methodology we have jointly developed, and we will also already present indicators from the three sustainability dimensions, from the ecological dimension, the economic, and the social cultural dimension. And within the ecological dimension, we are eager to hear the first results of Professor Dr. Tome Kakuli-Duarte from the Southeast Technological University in Ireland, from Bert Everett from INACRO, and from Dr. Ivona Sigurnia from University of Ghent. From the economic dimension, Professor Dr. Katharina Gab-Schmeling will give us the insights to one specific indicator, and from the social cultural dimension, Dr. Nies Power from the Munster Technological University will give us here aspects on the assessment of the social dimension. We are ending our session today with a wrap-up and discussion moderated by me and Katharina Gab-Schmeling. She is working for ICES and also for the German University of Applied Sciences in Potsdam, to add to this. Okay, let's start then with the presentations, and I will open the floor then for Professor Dr. Katharina Gab-Schmeling to introduce the methodology for sustainability assessment for future farming. Thank you very much, and you can now start with presenting.
Thank you very much, Katja, and hello and a warm welcome from my side as well. You will have to listen to me a couple of times today in the webinar. So I will first start with the introduction of the methodology, and I will later come back for some overviews for each dimension and also give you a more detailed insight into one of the economic indicators. So let me start with the introduction. What will we do? We developed a methodology. We call it SA4F, Sustainability Assessment for Fertilizers for Future Farming. That's why 4F. What 4F is standing for. And what we're doing in the very first step is we're comparing a reference scenario for nitrogen and phosphorus with an RDF scenario for nitrogen and phosphorus. So in that way, we will recognize and see the strengths and weaknesses of each fertilizer, reference scenario, and RDF regarding sustainability criteria. How did we choose those sustainability criteria? The basis for our criteria system is 3 steps. The first step is we had a look at the Sustainable Development Goals, which I believe everybody by now knows, and half of the time is already gone. Secondly, since the Sustainable Development Indicators do not cover all aspects of sustainability. So, for example, especially in the economic dimension, some criteria such as price stability and employment are not very deeply integrated into the SDGs. So we combined this with the criteria system of sustainable economics. Sustainable economics is a school of thought. There's a network of sustainable economics in Europe, and we adapted their criteria system and also integrated the goals of the European Union regarding ecological, economic, and social goals as they're written in the Treaty on the European Union and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. All 3 aspects combined are our sustainability assessment fertilizers for future farming criteria system. What will it look like in the end of our project? I brought a few examples from other projects. I don't want to go through them in depth, but what you see is that we usually have a visualization with strengths and weaknesses in a profile line diagram. So what we will be able to show you is, for example, what are the strengths of certain RDFs compared to the reference scenarios, but we might also see some weaknesses. And at ICES, we are not doing this kind of sustainability assessment for the first time. As you can see with the 3 examples, we've done this a couple of times, for example, for the evaluation of legal instruments, for the benchmarking of countries, and also you could easily do it with companies, and for example for the sustainability assessment of municipal heat transformation projects. So in summary, what did we gain with the SA4F methodology? The objective was to develop a dedicated methodology to assess the sustainability of RDF, which we will be able to do this. The basis is the Sustainable Economics Principles aligned with United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and based on common goals of the European Union. The approach for that is then transparent, a multi-criteria evaluation framework. The novelty lies in it that it's an adapted methodology, but now we're addressing fertilizer-specific challenges, and we also changed some of the indicators. And the goal, why are we doing this sustainability assessment, is to enable an informed decision-making and for the farmers and for all practitioners to promote a resilient, circular and regional nutrient strategies in Northwest Europe. The full methodology report is also available at the ICES website. So how does our criteria system look like? Our criteria system comes with sustainability criteria in all 3 dimensions of sustainability, because we want to establish sufficient standards in the ecological, economic, and social cultural dimension within planetary boundaries. And this is what the criteria system actually aims for. In the ecological dimension, we have, for example, greenhouse gas emissions, but we also have the nutrient input-output ratio and so on. I will come to this in a minute. In the economic dimension, we are based on some of the SDGs, but we also combine this with the goals, with the economic goals of the European Union, for example, employment, price stability, and no dependence on imports. In the social cultural dimension, we also combine this with the social goals of the European Union and the Sustainable Development Goals. I do not want to go too deeply into this right now. We will have a closer look at each dimension. And we'll start with the ecological dimension. With the ecological dimension, I will first give you a brief introduction and then hand over to Dr. Tome Carlo-Duarte and also Bert Everard and Dr. Ivona Skjunak from the University of Ghent to show you some examples of specific indicators, and then we will go on with the economic dimension. The ecological dimension consists of 5 indicators, and each of these 5 indicators is based on a challenge and on a criterion and has a focus SDG. So what we see in the ecological dimension, that of course it's climate action, but it's also life on land and life below water that we're having a closer look at, but it's also the responsible consumption and production as well as good health and well-being that we'd like to focus on. You see here on the right column that I highlighted 3 indicators, and those are the indicators that we'll have a closer look at. with our experts from the consortium. And I'm happy to hand over for the first indicator, the ecological dimension and the soil biological degradation and the nematodes. Tomé, floor is all yours. Just hold on a second. We're looking for Tomé. Yes. Is Bart or Bert already here? I saw Bert. Bert?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. It seems like Tomé has experiencing technical difficulties, so I'll switch to your indicator if that's fine for you.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. So this is the
excuse me. I'm here from Setu as well. I work with Dr. Tomé, and I'm trying to reach her right now. But maybe Bat can go first. If I can't find her, then I'll present on her behalf.
Okay. So yeah, we will just switch both indicators. So first we will now have a look at the criterion number 4, which is the nutrient input versus output ratio. This is an important indicator because it relies on how we can use our soil. But Bert, you will say more to this. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. So indeed, one of the ecological is about nutrients, and one way we can try to measure this, how the inputs relate to the outputs of the system, is by making nutrient balances. And we are with the ReNu2Cycle project. We are conducting field experiments with RDFs at Inagro, and I just worked out one case of one demonstration trial that we did, where I made some balances, mostly focused on the carbon and nitrogen balances in this case. So maybe if you can go back to the previous slides still, I'll just give a brief summary of it. So we did a demonstration in maize where we used ammonium sulfate as an RDF, as a nitrogen source, and also mineral concentrate and biological effluent as a potassium source. And this we compared to the farmer's practice, which was cow slurry plus synthetic fertilizers. And we saw no significant differences in yield in this case. And on the next slides, I will show you the first balance, which focuses on carbon. So in this trial, replaced animal manure application with a manure product, which contains negligible amounts of organic matter. So here I made a balance. On the left side, you can see the inputs in the system on the table, and on the right side, and then see the balance. So I used the numbers here from the literature from our government that they provide. And in the soil that we used, the minimal annual effective organic carbon amount that is required is 175 EOC per hectare. So that's the amount you have to input into the soil to keep the carbon levels the same. In this case, we use silage maize, which provides 470 EOC per hectare. This is the same for both cases, so the cow slurry and the RDF treatment. But the difference is that the cow slurry provides 540 kilograms of EOC per hectare. Because we replaced this with the RDF, which provides almost no organic carbon, you see that the balance really goes into the negative numbers. So one important thing to keep in mind when you're using RDFs is that you need a carbon source to really keep your soil health up to date. This can be a green cover crop, for example, or try to include organic manure in rotation. This is ways how we can solve this. So this was for carbon. On the next slide, I'll show you the nitrogen balance from the same trial. So again, the cow slurry treatment, and then the RDF treatment. Below, I also showed the synthetic fertilizer treatment, where we just used synthetic fertilizer as an extra control. This is a bit more difficult because nitrogen is especially nitrate, is very mobile, so it doesn't really stay in the soil during the whole year. So it's not that if there's an excess that there's going to be a larger nitrogen stock because with heavy rainfall, it's leaches as well. And in this case, I tried to also split up inputs and outputs. On the left side, you can see the 3 inputs that I kept into account, which is a soil mineral nitrogen when we sowed the maize, then the nitrogen fertilization that we used, which was the same in all treatments, and then also the mineralization that we tried to simulate with one of our models. Then on the output side, we looked at the nitrogen uptake from the crop. For this, we just looked at the yield and then analyzed the samples in the lab for N content, and then also the residue in soil at harvest. And if you make a balance of this, just add them all up, you can see that with the cow slurry treatments, we had one of the best balance, while the RDF treatment and the synthetic fertilizer both varied a bit from a balance of 1. Just one thing to keep in mind here, there's a large amount of parameters, so there's a lot of margin for error in this case, but it can kind of give you an indication of a balance. Then on the next slide, I'll just give you one last alternative maybe for the nitrogen balance, which is the nitrogen fertilizer replacement value. But for this, you need extra parameters during your, you need to have extra treatments, I guess, during your trials. So this just looks at the replacement value of your fertilizer compared to the synthetic fertilizer treatment. Because we did not have a control in a maize trial, I just showed an example from another trial, which is a potato trial here, where we also used RDFs instead of animal manure. So here we just looked at the nitrogen uptake from every treatment, which is maybe we just, I'll just explain the blends that we used. We used mineral concentrate plus ammonium sulfate, mineral concentrate plus pig urine, mineral concentrate plus liquid fraction. And here we just look at the nitrogen uptake from the crop. With that, we can, we can look at the ANR, which stands for the, which is the N uptake from the crop, from the treatments, minus the nitrogen uptake from the control, the unfertilized control, divided by the N rate. So if we then divide the ANR from the treatment by the ANR from the synthetic fertilizer, we get the NFRV, so the nitrogen fertilization replacement value. And the closer this is to 1, the more it resembles the synthetic fertilizer. So in this case, we see that the MC plus ammonium sulfate treatment is closest to 1. Yeah. So this has the best, I guess, replacement value for nitrogen, which is an alternative for the N balance that I showed in the previous slide. So these are just some brief examples of ways to look at the nutrient balances. In the coming trials, we were also planning to do this for a broader variety of nutrients. So we also take potassium and phosphorus into account, for example. So that's it for me. I don't know if there's time for questions or do you have to go on?
We will try to have some time for the questions at the end of the ecological dimension. Thank you very, very much, Bert. And I saw Tommy coming in. So I guess we can switch to that. I will brief you briefly do or make the bridge. So we now had a look at the nutrient input versus output ratio. This is a indicator that is connected with SDG 12, sustainable consumption and production, and the criterion what we're looking for is actually a sustainable use of soil as a resource. So we want to keep the soil in balance. We are now starting with a very important indicator for the soil biological degradation. So this is an indicator looking at the biodiversity. This indicator and the next indicator is closely connected to SDG 15, life on land, and this is a special novelty in our project that we're actually looking at two different indicators for the biodiversity because it has a very high impact on the use of, or how a very high impact on the sustainability using fertilizers. And Tome, I'm happy, I'm glad you're here, and I'm happy to hear more about the biodiversity.
Thank you, Katerina. I'm also very happy for being able to present the work we do in SCTU to support our project. And as you correctly said, Katerina, that is to do with criterion 2, natural compatibility, and we try to look at how our fertilizers are affecting soil biodiversity, and for that we use a particular type of phylum, which I will tell you all about. So could I have the next slide, please? So yes, we want to look at the diversity of mesofauna. Mesofauna would be not the very microscopic organisms and not the larger ones like insects, for example, or earthworms, but the organisms somewhere in between, which particularly we call them nematodes that we use in this assessment. And indeed, any inputs, and particularly in this case of fertilizers, would have an impact in the quality of the soil and the soil health. And we want to make sure that certain indicator organisms are not actually affected. We're using those organisms because they are very ubiquitous in the environment, those nematodes as we call them, which are like roundworm organisms. They are the most populous per individual and per species in the soil, so therefore they are great indicators of soil health because they occupy key positions in food webs. They eat other things in the soil and they are eaten by other things in the soil. So any disturbance in their communities reflects disturbance in other biodiversity in the soil. Next slide, please. And just briefly, just to consolidate what I just said about nematodes, they are very much involved with what we call ecosystem services. So ecosystem services are all the services that other communities, apart from the humans, I suppose, can give in the environment to support human life. And now we're dealing with ecosystem services of the soil, and nematodes are very good, not always directly, but also indirectly to support, for example, things like the production of food and fresh water, participating in wood and fuel and fiber production. They are great sources for genetic information, those nematodes, with the case of Caenorhabditis elegans or Pristionchus pacificus. They regulate diseases and pests in the soil. They help in bioremediation, decontamination, and effectively climate and water regulation. And they are very important with the organic matter decomposition that they participate to help in forming soil and to get directly involved in nutrient cycling in plant growth. Nutrient cycling is something very important in relation to our project specifically. Next slide, please. And in order to look at the biodiversity of nematodes, we look in what we call feeding groups of nematodes. In other words, we look at their heads of the nematodes, and you can see in the upper part of the panel illustrations of how the heads look like, and then the real photographs underneath. And from how the mouth parts are formed, we can classify them and we categorize them in what we call nematode feeding groups. May I have the next slide, please? And when we do this kind of categorization, then we can classify them into what we call the CP scale assignment, which is the fourth row in this table. And this is the one system of analyzing these communities that we work mostly in the project. But we also have other metrics. We can look at the total abundance, how many of individuals we have in per 100 square cubic centimeters of soil. We can look at the various ecological indices, analyzing operational taxonomical units of nematodes. We can look at the relative abundance, how many individuals per trophic group in the total number of nematodes in the soil sample. And also we look at trophic groups directly by doing soil food diagnostics. May I have the next slide, please? And here you see how the CP scale is being formulated, where on the left side of the scale we have what we call more colonizing nematodes, opportunists that are very resilient to environmental disruption. And as we go towards the higher number 5, you see more towards the predatory and omnivoric type of nematodes, which are more sensitive to environmental disturbance. May I have the next slide, please? And applying the CP scale grouping, we could then categorize our soils into 4 categories from 1 to 4 to 5. And if we have more into CP scale 4 or 5, we have very sensitive nematodes. So therefore, our soils are good. If we have lots of sensitive nematodes, the soils are not sick, the soils are healthy. Whereas if we have more opportunistic nematodes in the lower part of the scale, in number 1, that they can grow in any conditions, those soils might actually manifest environmental disruption. May I have the next slide, please? And because in ReNu2Cycle we are the partners with the latest deliverable, we deliver in period 8. We haven't analyzed really all our trials yet, so we can't really conclude as such for this webinar. So therefore we decided to use as a study case the ReNu2Farm project, which was the mother project of ReNu2Cycle. We did very similar work in the ReNu2Farm project. We focused primarily on struvite in this presentation because we got really great results using nematodes assessing the struvite performance. So we did 3 trials of struvite in Ireland, twice in 2019 and 1 in 2020. May I have the next slide, please? And as you can see, in 2019 trial A, the largest proportion of nematodes that we found was on CP scale 4, mostly omnivorous and predatory nematodes. Here we tested 2 struvites, Clairbout struvite, it's a potato waste struvite, and a V&V struvite. These are the companies mainly who make those struvites, and you can see in treatments E and F, primarily we have larger amounts of those CP4 nematodes, which are very similar to what happens in the mineral application, the synthetic mineral application, which also is very similar to what happened in the control treatment, which is column A. So we see that the input of struvites did not disturb the soil at all. So that was a great result. Next slide, please. And again, in the second trial in 2019, we got very similar results. Again, we checked for the Clairbout struvite and the V struvite in J and K columns respectively. A lot of omnivore and predator nematodes, very similar to mineral fertilizer application in B and to negative control in A. May I have the next slide, please? Now, this is a trial that our partners carried out in Belgium. No, actually, no, that's also, excuse me, the ReNu2Farm trial is in Belgium. Our partners in Ireland also carried out with Limerick and Chagas. And in here now, we didn't get as many omnivores, but we were somewhere in the middle of the range of our CP scale, showing that the Clairbout struvite application and the VEV struvite application did not significantly alter the soil profile in terms of nematodes trophic groups. The nematodes on the CP3 are somewhere in the middle. They are presenting a soil that is not the best, but is not as disturbed, and we can see similar to the control application. So the result was quite good in comparison to mineral and to untreated control. May I have the next slide, please, Katerina? No, that's the one I want to focus on the Belgian trials. Here we checked on ammonium sulfate in comparison to synthetic fertilizers, using again the CP scale application. And here we observed that the ammonium sulfate did not behave as good as the struvite, but in comparison to the mineral fertilizer, we got similar results. And we got mostly CP1 nematodes appearing. And CP2 also was quite prominent as well. Again, not the best in terms of soil health, but again, when compared to the mineral, our ammonium sulfate did not behave that bad. May I have the next slide, please? So I'm just now I'm going to show another diagnostic that we're using in our assessments. Here we are getting all our nematodes from our samples, and we classify them again as per their trophic group, and then we are applying this test whereby we plot the ecological indices where we're testing the enrichment index and the structure index, and we get a visual matrix, and we place into the matrix all the data points that we have. And ideally, in our trials, we want to see most of our data accumulating in the right-hand side and represent the lower part of the square, where we have a mature soil, fertile, moderate carbon to nitrogen ratio, and suppressive soils, and so forth. May I have the next slide, please? So we apply this kind of test when we use our struvites in Ireland, and we had really very good results. And we can see the 2019 trial A, all our data points are in the bottom right-hand side corner. Can I have the next slide, please? In the second trial of 2019, similar results. You can see all our data points accumulating in the best soil kind of assignment that we could have gotten in the mature, fertile, and so forth square. Next slide, please. Here in the 2020 trial, the results are scattered a bit more, but still the tendency, the trend is to be accumulating in our food diagnostics, food web diagnostics test at the bottom right-hand side corner of our matrix. And then the next one, please. Again, as it happened with the CP scale, we didn't get as best result with ammonium sulfate, and we got them more onto the disturbed side of things. But for us, it's a very good confirmation to show that both our indicators are working well. We got similar patterns using both indicators for the ecological dimension, and we're quite pleased. So may I have the next slide, please, which is the last one I want to present. So in our overall looking at our results, we can see that they point towards a nutrient management path that does not compromise the integrity of the soil biological systems. We're very happy with that, particularly in the case of the struvite. Struvite, we can conclude it supported a highly complex, structured, and resilient soil food web. And for the nitrogen-based ammonium sulfide, we see an ecological advantage evident compared to the synthetic can fertilizer, mineral fertilizer that we used, which is primarily the nitrogen, ammonium, and calcium fertilizer. We saw that the application of RDF supported mature, structured, and self-regulating system, similar to the natural fertilizer environments, and so that was actually very good. So we can conclude overall that struvite and ammonium sulfate RDFs strongly maintain the ecological integrity of the agricultural soils, and we're very happy that with the use of nematodes, which reflect disturbances in other groups and other taxa in the soil, we didn't see them being disturbed. So if the nematodes are not disturbed, then we're very happy that the soil biodiversity overall is in good condition in response to our RDFs. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I could stay here for questions if you wanted. Thank you.
Thank you very much
for exceeding my time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tome. We will try to speed up things in the economic dimension and then probably come back to questions after this, but we're still in the ecological dimension. And we have one more focus indicator in the ecological dimension. So I'm happy to invite Ivona. We now had a look at biodiversity, nutrient input and output ratio, and what's also important about using new fertilizers is the question of good health and well-being for humans and the environment, and so that's why we're focusing on the concentration of heavy metals in fertilizers. And you're already sharing your slides, Ivona. Thank you. Floor is all yours.
Thank you, Katarina. Good morning, everyone. As already mentioned, the next presentation deals with criterion 5, healthy life conditions, that falls under Sustainable Development Goal 3. Here, among all the other aspects, we also look at the reduced environmental health risks. So more specifically, like it's stated in Sustainable Development Goal 3, air pollution and hazardous chemicals. Since in ReNu2Cycle, we deal with RDF, so recycle-derived fertilizers, then the thought comes to heavy metals. In general, I would like to state that heavy metals are essential elements that are required by plants and microorganisms at low concentration. Of course, when they're present in high concentration, they can lead to pollution and to toxicity. Since we deal with recycled fertilizers, depending on the use feedstock from which they were produced and applied treatment process, there is a risk that they contain perhaps higher concentration of heavy metals. So we cannot exclude completely saying that they are in full safe. Therefore, we need to look into their metal content. And from there, we aim in future towards the end of this project to develop sort of like a heavy metal compliance index that will be part of the sustainability assessment, which will basically indicate to what extent the certain RDF complies with the legal limits. When we look at the legal limits, and we are in Europe, so then we cannot actually ignore the fertilizing products regulation framework that defines the maximum allowable concentrations for the pollutants in the CE marked fertilizers. Depending on the product function category or component material category, there are the following maximum allowable concentrations that are stated in this regulation on a milligram per kilogram dry matter basis. So, for example, for cadmium, it's 1.5 milligrams for organic fertilizers and 3 milligrams for inorganic. Then we have chromium 6, 2 milligrams, mercury 1, lead 120, nickel 50 milligrams for organic fertilizers, 100 for inorganic, and the last one, inorganic arsenic. So how do we actually make a link of all of this in our project? Well, first we have to assess RDFs, and we start with listing the most interesting RDFs that we will assess in our project. Some of them have been already collected from the producers and analyzed in accredited labs for heavy metal content. Some of them not yet, but the list mostly we will focus like on types of RDF such as ammonium sulfate, true white digestate, finesse, mineral concentrate, pig urine, liquefaction of digestate. Today I would present only the results that we have at the moment, and they concern these here following 5 RDFs that were collected from Flanders, so in Belgium, and applied in Flemish field trial that was presented by Bert already the results. So these 5 fertilizers, they are basically nitrogen and potassium-based liquid RDFs, and it is ammonium sulfate from stripping scrubbing technology. Then we have pig urine from separated stable construction, liquefaction of digestate, so it is after separation, mechanical separation of digestate, the liquid part, biological effluent. By that we mean manure treatment in nitrification and nitrification process, and then we have mineral concentrate from reverse osmosis. And at the bottom will come soon the already mentioned the FPR thresholds. So we have the thresholds below, and when we look at the first results from ammonium sulfate, this product complies what we analyzed with FPR. Here I would just like to highlight that fertilizers RDFs can have a relatively higher level of chromium, but for the pollutant aspects, we look at chromium 6, which is more toxic. So basically there's no threshold for chromium total, but only for chromium 6. The other 3 products, pig urine, liquefaction of digestate, biological effluent, these are all manure-based products. So all manure recovered fertilizers, they also all comply with the limits. And then the last product from reverse osmosis of manure, here we can see a little bit, let's say, sort of orange color. We have exceedances for cadmium, exceedance for mercury, and exceedance for nickel, which is above the FPR limits. So what happened here? First, you would ask yourself, it just comes from here. How can it have so much metals? But it's actually quite already known, nothing that we discovered new. It's related because it's a liquid product. So you cannot ignore when we look at the metals, the dry matter percentage in this fertilizer. And you can see this mineral concentrate has the lowest dry matter, only 0.95%. So basically it's like water. And in the labs, what accredited labs do, they analyze the metals in a fresh sample, and then they have to convert, basically this is the detection limit, to the milligram per kilogram of dry matter, and then they get up concentration. Here below you can see the results of the same product just on a fresh product basis, and you can see everything was nicely in compliance with the limits. So for this type of products, I think the recommendation could be in future that if it's such a low dry matter content, basically we should not express these metals on dry matter, but just on a fresh matter, as it's already being done in FPR for micronutrient fertilizers, but not for macronutrient fertilizers. So something that we will keep in future. And we also have to check actually to what extent do we have that amount of that so abundant types of RDF that will have a low dry matter content. So the next step, like Katarina said, okay, we have RDFs and we have to compare towards the conventional ones that are on the market, such as calcium ammonium nitrate or potassium sulfate. I try to have a look at it. It's really not so much information available. Of course, you would expect low concentration. That's basically what it comes in public available data sheets, low concentration of metals as they're formulated fertilizers. Maybe some trace metals would come from just natural materials that are added for the addition of calcium or potassium, so from the rocks. But with the market controls in place, we do not expect such a high concentration of metals, but we still plan to analyze some of these representative fertilizers to see, actually, to be able to compare the amounts in RDFs versus the conventional ones. The higher challenge, of course, we all know it comes with mineral phosphorus fertilizers, especially because of the concentration of cadmium. And here I would just like to briefly touch it, because we will still have struvite, like Thomas mentioned. We also still plan to collect struvites, and we have to analyze struvite. So we will then compare the struvite also against the conventional phosphorus fertilizers. Here we have the thresholds, the similar thresholds. The only difference here is that for cadmium, if you're not aware, for phosphorus fertilizers, the cadmium threshold is dependent on the percentage of P2O5. If the fertilizer contains less than 5% P2O5, then the threshold is 3 milligrams of cadmium per kilogram. But if the P2O5 is above 5%, then the threshold rises to 60 milligrams of cadmium. And here I wanted to, because I couldn't find also a lot of information, but there were recent studies from this year, from Zank 2025. So it's actually a German study where they analyzed 150 different types of phosphorus fertilizers, so mineral fertilizers, from the Institute of Crop and Soil Sciences. Basically has entire collection. They analyze it and separate it in igneous and sedimentary phosphate fertilizers. And you can see it complies. There's not really exceedances, because all these fertilizers have more than 5% of P2O5, so the cadmium threshold of 60 is not doesn't go above. And also there was a Polish study from this year where they also just collected like 9 different phosphorus mineral fertilizers available on Polish market. They also checked it, basically not such exceedances in terms of metals, except for 2 fertilizers who had a little bit too much of nickel. So 154 milligrams as compared to 100 milligrams. But what I thought interesting, I was not aware of it, but something food for thought to think. Both of the studies are pointing actually at a new component, and that is uranium. At natural radioactive isotopes, they say there's quite some uranium in the fertilizers and phosphorus fertilizers. And according to Zank et al., apparently, according to this article, around 700 tons of uranium are being applied yearly on European agricultural soils in terms in the form of phosphorus fertilizers. So it's something that we would like to look into as well, not by analyzing uranium isotopes, but looking to what extent also this can have an impact on human health, as is being stated in these 2 articles. So what is the conclusion? We have to continue still with collection of other RDFs in our project, analyze all of them. We have to a little bit see how we differentiate between the liquid and the solid ones, and how it should be expressed, the metal content on the dry matter basis or actually not. And continue actually collecting ourselves maybe some fertilizers, conventional one from the market, to analyze for metals, so we can actually do the comparison of the health risks from the RDFs as compared to the market available ones. Thank you. That will be all from my side.
Thank you very much, Ivone. Thank you all 3 for presenting the ecological dimension. I will share the slides again. We're a couple of minutes behind in our schedule, so I'll just speed up things presenting the economic dimension, and then hopefully we will have time for a few questions, and at the end have time for the discussion and the wrap up. So we're now looking at the second dimension of the sustainability assessment. And like I said in the introduction, we're aiming at sufficient standards in all 3 dimensions within the limits of natural boundaries. And in the economic dimension, here you see we are touching 5 SDGs, but it is important to note that in the economic dimension, actually, especially those SDG 9, 12, and 17, they're only slightly touched. We do not have sufficient indicators in these SDGs. However, we do have economic indicators that directly derived from the Treaty of the European Union and the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. So that's why we selected those indicators. So in the economic dimension, we're looking at the regional value added within the supply chain. And what we see in our preliminary results is that since RDFs are locally produced, usually they have a better impact on the regional value than imported mineral fertilizers from outside Europe. For the satisfaction of basic needs, we're looking at the availability and accessibility in terms of market penetration. So as Katja stated in the beginning, the market is still in development, and this is a goal of the project. But farmers also need appropriate prices for the demand and supply. So the suppliers of RDFs need prices to cover their costs, but the farmers need sufficient and reliable pricing for the fertilizers to also have not too high costs. And what I'd like to emphasize, and we're having a closer look at, is the share of imports. We haven't done the analysis for RDFs yet, but for the preliminary results, we did analyze some of the conventional fertilizers. So this economic indicator relies on the share of imports, because if we have a high share of imports, then we have a high dependency on others. So if we're importing 80% or 90% of our fertilizers into Europe, then we're relying especially on countries that might also come with a higher conflict potential, which then would be a social indicator. So we want to reduce this reliance, this dependency on others, and that's why we're looking at these indicators. I have to admit that the data availability for this indicator is limited. So, but we do have some data, which I'll come to in a minute, and it is linked to the SDG 17 partnerships for the goals, because it highlights the importance of resilient and fair international supply chains and emphasizes the importance of global and European cooperation and partnerships in addressing complex issues in the trade imbalances. And we want to limit trade imbalances. That's why the adopted indicators measures the share of imports for fertilizers into the European Union. If the agricultural practice that we're looking at, or the fertilization strategy, relies heavily on fertilizers or input materials that are largely imported and for which no domestic alternatives are available, this leads to significant external dependency. In extreme cases, the European Union might be forced to make political compromises to secure continued access to these materials, and this is what we do not want. So this risk can be mitigated through strategies that promote the independence and substitutability, so through domestic recycling nutrients. And for this indicator, we're looking at the whole European Union. We are not looking only at the region, because we only have data for the whole European Union. How do we measure this indicator? We measure this indicator for now conducting desk research and using secondary data from the European Union on the share of imports for conventional mineral fertilizers in the European Union. We are looking at current trade data. So AgriData from the European Union publishes data on the fertilizer production, imports, and exports. To calculate, or let's rather say estimate, the import share of fertilizers, we need available data on the domestic production, imports, and exports. Although information on stock changes is not available, a simplified approach using the imports and the exports can provide a reasonable approximation. So the import share for our project is calculated as the ratio of the net imports, so imports minus exports, to the total apparent supply, so the domestic production plus net imports. This does not account for year-to-year changes in the storage, but it gives a consistent estimation over time. It should be noted, however, that the domestic production itself often relies on imported raw materials or intermediate goods, for example, natural gas for nitrogen fertilizers, which we usually also import into the European Union. And as an example, we had a look at some of the conventional fertilizers. And you see here an import share, for example, for phosphates, about 28%, which then would, in our current rating system, lead to level 3, compared, for example, to phosphatic fertilizers, which is a special group and with special trade data, which would have rating level 1. But keep in mind, we couldn't account for the imported imports because the European Union trade data does not give us this information. And to the limit of I will take questions later in the discussion section, or we have, let me check, we do have 4 minutes for question before we enter the social dimension. So yeah, we can take 4 minutes of questions for the ecological or the economic dimension, if there are any.
Can I just grab the mic?
Yes, sure.
Hi,
Hi,
my name
Magnus
is
Johansson.
Magnus from Iceland. I just when I think it was Ivona who mentioned uranium, and I kind of got a little scared when she said that. How much of a red flag is this?
I do not know. I was astonished by reading it. I have to want to read a little bit more on my own. It's the 2 articles from this year, and it's all European fertilizers. I was really astonished on my own. It's a natural isotope. It's not like on purpose added, but apparently in these papers they advocate for adding the limit on uranium in the FPR as well for the phosphate fertilizers. So let's say they analyzed the first article 150 fertilizers from Europe, and the Polish one I think only 9 or 10, and they're both pointing more towards in that direction, which yeah, I'm really astonished as well by that. I want to read more to figure out what's happening there. Yeah, it sounds scary.
It does.
Yes, I know, but yeah, I will look also into more of it definitely for the sustainability assessment, but I was not aware. It was just for preparation of this presentation and then trying to find the recent articles. So let's see.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much. There was one question in the chat regarding the nematodes. So hello.
I was just writing on the chat. I saw it. Thank you. So that's a very good question, actually, regarding conventional organic agriculture. But we didn't actually try any of these trials in our background in our ReNu2Farm. So unfortunately, we don't have data in this context. But the best bet we have at the moment is to compare to our negative controls, and in our negative controls we have very good alignment between untreated control and treated with RDF, meaning that the soil didn't seem to get disturbed whatsoever from the addition of the RDF in the context of how the nematodes behaved in the soil. I don't know if that answers your question, Anne.
I guess you will write in the chat.
Yes, maybe I'm just adding one aspect from the ReNu2Cycle project. So first time we are also researching on organic agriculture. So we will have in that year, but only in 2026, one field located in Saarland, Germany, with organic agriculture, RDF trials. So that will mean that also on these nematode assessments within 2026, we will get some results on this specific soil treatment.
That would be very interesting to see, actually. When we get to
but
that.
this will just be started in 2026.
Thank you, Ivona, for the link to the article. And now we'll start having a closer look at the sustainability assessment from the social dimension perspective. And so again, we want to have sufficient standard in all three dimensions of sustainability. So we had a look at the ecological dimension and the economic dimension. And I'm very happy that now for the social dimension, MTU will join us. So for the social cultural dimension, you see we're touching several sustainable development goals, and it's also a wide area from acceptance to dependence of farmers on others, and also the conflict potential, for example, for the resources used, which is actually interconnected with the import share, but it's not only the import share having an impact on the conflict potential, but also the country of origin. Where does the mineral fertilizer come from? And is this country of origin engaged in, for example, global or international conflicts? And we also derived those indicators based on the criterion to respond to a global challenge and a focus SDG. And I'm very happy to now hand over to Neith for the social dimension. Neith.
Thank you. Thanks, Katerina. Will you just move on the slide there, please? Thanks very much. So this criteria that we're speaking about today is looking at RDF acceptance and awareness. So Katia highlighted earlier that the ReNu2Cycle project is using a living lab approach. So that means we're trying to get the different stakeholders across the, I suppose, the value chain of recycled derived fertilizers, and trying to understand their opinion, their acceptance, their awareness of recycled derived fertilizers. So within this project, we're taking a three-pronged approach. The first one is we're looking at surveys, trying to identify key considerations. We're also looking at workshops. This is where we get people from industry, we get farmers, we get suppliers, we get researchers in a room for workshops, and we co-create what the value chain might look like in the future. And we'll also be doing one-to-one interviews. And this again allows us to delve deeper into what's really happening within the RDF market. So we just move on the slide there. So we're going to build upon the results from ReNu2Farm. So in ReNu2Farm, we did an extensive survey, and we were looking at how we can find the important properties or qualities of recycled derived fertilizers, because we want to know what farmers need and what farmers are looking for, so that our producers and our suppliers can take that into consideration when they're developing these materials. So the purpose of the survey as part of ReNu2Farm was to identify what the farmers want, what qualities, parameters and properties were important, maybe what type of texture was important, but also what would allow them, or what qualities would make them consider substituting. So what would they need to have acceptance of recycling derived fertilizers? So the next couple of slides I'm going to go through will highlight some of these properties, and we'll explain then how we're going to take that on and develop it further for this particular sustainability criteria. So the first thing we asked farmers was it was an open-ended question, and it was, what properties are important to know when selecting a fertilizer? And from a farmer's perspective, this is a word cloud that was generated. We had over nearly 900 responses to this particular one, so we had a lot of farmers who engaged with this. And look, they want to know the suitability, they want to know the content of it, they want to know the cost, they want to know the quality. So again, it was really much about, is it at the right price point? Does it have the correct content in terms of nutrient content, but also free from contaminants, leading back to what Ivona mentioned earlier, and also what's the price or the cost of this and the quality of it. Click on there. Yeah, so when we're asked from an advisor perspective, the similar type of thing started coming up, with the exception of price. They talked about the nutrients, they talked about the content, the composition. So really, when we looked at this, it became very clear to us the farmers and advisors do care about what's in the recycled derived fertilizers. So click on there, please, Katerina. So we started to look at two different groups of people. So on the left-hand side there, you will see users, and these are current users of recycled derived fertilizers. And on the bottom, we have non-users, which are people who have never used recycling derived fertilizers. And what we see actually is very similar trends come up. So for people who've used it before, they want a nutrient content that fits with their crop. They like high organic matter content. The price point to be at an appropriate level. They want a certification for quality, and they want to make sure it's easy to use. When we looked at non-users, what they were, again, very similar. It was price point was important, ease of use, certification, nutrient content, and again, the ability to use the same machineries and machinery tracks, etc., because they didn't want to invest in additional equipment. And that all kind of feeds into, I suppose, our sustainability criteria of looking at RDFs, that a lot of these are what the farmers are actually telling us. Can you just click on there again, Katerina? So we're looking at what are the different important qualities of RDF. So for those of you who've used RDF before, they were looking at the storage, the quality, the products, the smell might be an issue in some instance. And for non-users, they were looking at the nutrients. It's very important to know the nutrients, and they also need to know how to use it. And this is something that we have found in the ReNu2Cycle project from our workshops, which I'll go through in a little bit. Can you click on there again, Katerina? So what's really important is when we're talking about recycling derived fertilizers, we have to remember that mineral fertilizers are so ingrained in the farming community at the moment. And this has also come out at our workshops, that a farmer doesn't really need to think about recycling mineral fertilizers. They go to the local supplier, they order it, they comes into their farm and they just apply it. In terms of headspace, they don't need to really think about it. But for recycled derived fertilizers to get the same level of acceptance, we have to make it easier for them. So we asked them previously, which was what qualities would encourage your substitution? And these are the ones that came out on top. Okay, so a known NPK concentration. They like to know exactly what's the nutrient content, so when they apply it on the land, they know what to expect. They want the nutrient ratio that will fit with their crop demand. So if their crop needs a lot of P or a lot of N, is that within in the right content for their crop? They'd also like a high organic matter content. And what was interesting to see about this one was that for those of you who have used recycled derived fertilizers before, this was actually quite important to them, which signifies either that they value the high organic matter content for their soil improvement qualities, or that maybe they are more conscious of their long-term soil health and that's what they're looking for. Certified products was also very important, as well as the ease of use. So you can see there, we keep asking farmers in different ways what they actually need, and they're consistently telling us the exact same thing. So that tells us that these properties are actually very, very important. Katerina, can you switch on there? Yeah. So again, we were looking in terms of cost because the price point and cost is actually very important as well. Farming, for anyone who's into the farming sector, will understand that it is a low margin game, so that they are very price conscious of anything that they have to do with their farming system. So we asked, how willing would you be to substitute mineral fertilizers with RDS? And obviously, what we can see there is that, if it's cheaper than mineral fertilizer, or it's subsidized or free of charge, we can find a market for it. But if it becomes as the same price as mineral fertilizers, or if it's more than fertilizers, they really don't want to accept it at that price point, because it doesn't make sense for them from an economic perspective. And that's one thing we find about the social perspective, is that there is a link to the economic, but it's important we understand that link. What's also very important is the last one there, is that there is going to be a cohort of people at the moment that just do not accept recycled derived fertilizers. It doesn't matter. They're just not willing to substitute. And that can be for a number of reasons. It can be from lack of knowledge, or it can be lack of acceptance, or it can just be that they just find the mineral fertilizers are so easy. Don't fix what's not broken. Can you move on the slide there, please, Katerina? Now, I wanted to show you this slide because I think this one is particularly interesting, which is to show that it doesn't really matter which country that you're from. We have very, very similar trends. So if we can see there, it doesn't matter whether you're in Belgium, Germany, Ireland, the Netherlands, if it is subsidized or free of charge, or if it's cheaper than mineral fertilizers, if you look across them, they all have pretty much the same level. And when you go to the right-hand side of that slide, not willing to substitute, again, we kind of see a consistent pattern here. So what this says is that throughout Europe, it's the same type of factors. It doesn't really matter which country that you are. The farming community have the same concerns, the same issue. The price point is the same. The nutrient content knowledge is the same. Or their willingness to not accept it is also the same. Can you move the slide on there, Katerina? So following on from the ReNu2Cycle, whenever you do a survey, you always like to answer follow-up questions. So as Katia mentioned there, one of the things that we're looking at is in ReNu2Cycle is using this living lab approaches. And this is where we get farmers, we get stakeholders, we get them into the room, we put them around tables, we talk, we discuss, we chat, and we can really find out what's going on kind of behind, a survey, and get into the depths of it a little bit more. So if you just move on there, Katerina. So this is the type of thing that we have found when it comes from these workshops. So there are concerns, okay, and the concerns are around contamination. They're around reliability. They're around, will they be delivered when they need? Are they biosecure? Do they have good enough quality? Are they traceable? In relation to costs, again, is it cheaper? Is it inefficient? What are the transport costs? Are they going to have maintenance costs? Is it going to impact how they actually apply it? If we look at the convenience then, what's the time difference? Is it going to be how's it going to be transport? Is there going to be scarcity of supply? So again, when we look at all of these, yes, it is about the quality of the fertilizer, but there are these other concerns and these other considerations around it, which also will impact people's acceptance of these particular products. If we just move on another slide there. So what we've also looked at is the key market barriers for recycled derived fertilizers. And one of the things that came out very clearly in the last workshop we hosted here in Ireland anyway, was about knowledge gaps. The uncertainty about nutrient content, but also maybe the lack of training. And that really came out clear in the workshop that we hosted back in October. And farmers were, and those in the community were telling to us, look, I don't know how to use them. And that knowledge gap is very, very important, because if farmers don't know how to use it, if it takes up too much headspace, then they kind of go, do you know what now? I'll just use what I stick with what I know I'll just keep going there. And we've forgotten that mineral fertilizers are so easy to use. We have to make it easier for people to use the recycled fertilizers. Okay. We also found in that workshop that there was policy barriers, there was systemic gaps, and there was market failures in a number of different areas. And I suppose we need to kind of look at this in the round as well, and how that impacts the social, the acceptance and the awareness of recycled fertilizers. So just move on from. So if we look kind of at a summary of the acceptance and the awareness there. Nutrient content is very important. Farmers want to have a consistent nutrient content that's known, that can actually be applied to their crops. They want the fertilizers at a cost and a price point which suits their demand, taking into account the efficiency of the actual fertilizers. They want some sort of quality guarantee, some sort of a certification, or at least a way that they can stand over the quality, because there are concerns about contaminations. And they also want something that's easy to use and that can be used perhaps with their own machinery, or it doesn't have an additional inconvenience for when they want to apply it. But we must also acknowledge that there are concerns, and we need to make sure that the industry is cognizant of these and make sure that we take them on board and try to reduce those concerns. But we also need to do better knowledge transfer and better sharing of knowledge of how best to use and how easy to use these particular products are. Last slide there, please. Now, if there are any farmers or if there are any producers of recycled derived fertilizers, we have a survey open for you to find out a little bit about the value chain. So there's one in English, there's one in German, French and Dutch. So we're just going to leave them there for 30 seconds so you can grab the QR code and you can complete the survey if at all possible. So there's my little plug, Katarina, before I hand back to you.
Great. I'm not a farmer, but my neighbor is. So
yeah, take that. Also, yeah, it's a great idea. If you know someone who can actually fill it out, take the link and share it with any of your farmers or colleagues who have.
I got the French one. I tried the German one again. For some reason, okay, last try.
I hope I haven't got them mixed up.
We can chat later, but seems like I always I don't get the German one.
Okay, sorry about that, Katarina.
I
checked them all last night and they seem to work last night. It's always typical, isn't it?
It's typical, but we can send when we're uploading the slides, we can also maybe just upload those QR codes again.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Neith. And we now come to the concluding part. But first of all, before we come to the wrap up, are there any questions regarding the social dimensions? Are there any questions to Neith Power?
I love grabbing the mic, don't I? Thank you, Neith. Magnus from Iceland again. I mean, I work on these issues day in and day out for many years, and it's the farmers that they should control what kind of fertilizer they can buy. Right? Well, I'm not saying this right, but if they are used to using granulated fertilizer because that's the spreader they use on their tractors and so on. So then the organic fertilizers that we are producing have to fit in there. And you can do that. You can dry wet stuff. You can then granulate the dried stuff and you can mix it. You can spike it. You can add it with nitrogen or potassium or whatever you like. And you can make that product that they want. That's how you get them going. This is what I dream about, at least. Sorry, there was no question.
No, you make a very good point. And one of the things I didn't show there is that we did have a question about which texture do farmers prefer. actually just took it out last night, late last night, out of the presentation because I was conscious of time. But actually, granular was the one that came up in top priority for the exact reason that you came up. It's because it's easy for them to use. They can use either existing machinery. And in a way, if it is dried and if it's granular, you get over, I suppose, a transportation cost issue in that, you know, sometimes something like digestate, it's so wet you can't transport it. The flip side of it, though, is that, you know, things like struvite, that is granular. That's perfectly made for something that can be put into the machines. And through our living lab here as part of this project, we have colleagues who have used it and farmers who have used it and are very, very happy with, and it has been a success on their farms. But if you have something like digestate, the cost to go and to dry it is a huge obstacle, and it's how do we get over that, you know? And this is part of the conversation, and I suppose it's part of why we're doing this research here. But I couldn't agree with you more. The more I talk to farmers, the more I realise that we need to meet the farmers where they're at. And because mineral fertilizers is so easy, we have to make it as easy as possible for them to use these recycled fertilizers. At least in the first instance, maybe down the line, once they're used to using RDFs, we might be able to change it. But at the moment, if we want that market uptake, we have to make it easier for farmers. You know, I'll always remember I was in County Tipperary a number of years ago, and I was giving a talk, and I met a really nice young farmer, and when I was chatting to him, he just said to me, he said, look, I've watched my dad work so hard on the land. And he said, I want to work smarter, not harder. And I just thought, that's clever, you know, and that's what we should be looking at. How do we make RDF smarter so that the farmers, you know, find it easier to use?
Yeah. I think it's a very, very good point. It needs to be even easier than the conventional mineral fertilizers. Because then it will be more easy to adapt. I would like to now join the wrap up and the discussion, even though we only have 6 minutes left. What we from the consortium want to highlight again, that we almost covered all SDGs. We did not touch SDG 4 and 5, and we only slightly touch SDG 6 and 14. We do touch both of them because as we saw in the nutrient balance, if especially the N is washed out of the soil, then this usually also leads to the eutrophication of water and to difficulties there. That's why we touch both of them. And I think it's one important outcome from the social dimension. Neith, you said we need to close the knowledge gap, and what I learned today about the knowledge gap is actually okay, then we need to also engage with SDG number 4, quality education. You can only close the knowledge gap if we get the message across in the systems for farmers that we do have. But what's your perspective also from our webinar participants? Are we missing anything? Is there, to your expertise, any specific knowledge that you like to contribute to this sustainability assessment?
Right, because this is also the main objective of our webinar series of this part, so that we are coming into contact with you in order to eventually get a verification of that, validation of that, what we have done. And also we are still missing some data to some specific indicators also, and we would like to rely on your expertise and on your research currently running. And this is the question. So for this feedback session here in very detailed, so that we can also get values out of your research to inject into our sustainability assessment. Yes, therefore the floor is open. Maybe you can just share with us your research, might be perfectly matching our to our sustainability assessment dimensions or indicators in particular. As we have said in the beginning, also this sustainability assessment is hosted under the ESNI Sustainability Group, and there are also many European projects under that roof already organized. And we would really like to share our methodology and the current data assessments with all of you. And if you cannot reply or don't want to reply directly on that, we would like to invite you also to, from January onwards that we are facilitating other working group meetings on the specific dimension. And if you're interested in that, you can contact us that we are directly inviting you in person, so with your project or with your organization, to be part of this further validation meetings. But now we still have, let's say, 5 minutes left or 3 to 5 minutes left on that day to exchange. Maybe just one final recommendations from you, what we should consider or how you would like to be part of our research group. Yes,
Anthony.
from Anthony.
I'm mute. Thank you,
Yes.
Katia. Yeah. I was just wondering when we were talking about the sustainability assessment for the ecological dimension. I was also thinking the possibility of including microplastics. They are key contaminants under organic fertilizers. There's much talk about heavy metals, but microplastics are key contaminants, which you might want to look at,
Very good, yeah.
Yeah, we could do this also in the contaminants concentration of heavy metals. It's actually the concentration of contaminants.
Yes, I was also thinking about that indicator.
But we need to talk to Ivona if it's possible in this project, if we have the equipment and the possibilities to have a look at the microplastics. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. And also from the legal perspective within the new, let's say, waste directives and other related European and national directives and legislations, this part, the microplastic part came already into these assessment schemes from the legislative thresholds. So it's a very good point and very on the time. Okay, so maybe then I would like to close the session. Thank you very much for your participation, and we are looking really ahead to collaborate further with you. We have already had the pleasure to have a first development of this methodology and to have showed you some preliminary results on some specific indicators. Within the year 2026, we would like now to finalize our indicator assessments and to go on the broad scientific dissemination road with that. Of course, this is just the first attempt, and as all good research is always defined, that we are going ahead. And that would mean that there is still a sort of an outlook, what we would like to further investigate under the sustainability assessment. For example, the scope of research could be enlarged. So we had now this assessment on N-based and on P-based RDF fertilizers, but the potassium, the K-based fertilizers, in comparison with synthetic reference scenarios, should be a second milestone to research further on. Then also, as just for an example, each region in Northwest Europe and also in Europe is different with their characteristics. So we could also design the sustainability assessment methodology more to regional criteria and specifications, so that, for example, for your for your country and for your region, you have more specific indicators that you can align for. So that could be also a momentum for further research. Also, what might be interesting to incorporate more the policy and regulatory integration, like we had now with the feedback of Anthony, the aspect of microplastics, which came into this framing policy instruments more and more. So we have to see also over the next years which other, let's say, aspects can be incorporated into the sustainability assessments in the perspective of the regulatory decision makers. So you see, it's not an ending point now, it's more, let's say, a good starting point. And with that, I would like to end this session today. Thank you very much to the speakers. I'm always proud and very, very happy to guide this expert community, this project, with all of your expertise on these specific indicators. Thank you very much. And yes, we are looking ahead, looking forward to keep in contact with you. Just contact us. Our maybe the last slide. Our email is here. It's not written here. I'm so sorry. It's ReNu2Cycle at ReNu2Cycle@ices.de, or just write us directly. We will forward and share your contacts, of course. Thank you so much, and meet you soon in the next year.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.